On September 10, 2024, 2 days after I'd purchased my dream retirement cabin with every penny I'd saved in 42 years, my son called me at 6:30 in the morning and said, "Mom, I need your cabin as collateral. Sign the papers or Zara loses the roof over her head." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply said, "We'll talk when you get here." Then I decided to do something about it. But before I tell you what happened next, let me tell you who I really am, because my son had no idea. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. And please, stay with me until the end. My name is Jasmine Marie Coleman. I was born on March 15, 1961, in the Five Points neighborhood of Denver, Colorado, a historic black community that used to be called the Harlem of the West. My father, Thomas Coleman, was a postal worker. My mother, Ruth Coleman, cleaned houses for white families in Cherry Creek. They saved every dollar so I could go to college. I graduated from the University of Colorado Boulder in 1983 with a degree in architecture. I was one of 3 black students in my program, and the only black woman. In 1985, I became one of the first African-American female architects licensed in the state of Colorado. The licensing board made me take the exam 3 times before they passed me, even though I'd scored higher than most of the white men who passed on their first attempt. For the next 42 years, I specialized in historic preservation, specifically restoring buildings that told the story of black heritage in Colorado. Not the kind of work that makes you rich, but the kind that makes you matter. I led the restoration of the Blair Caldwell African American Research Library in 5 Points, an $8 million project that took 4 years and won the National Register of Historic Places Award in 2007. I restored the Shorter AME Church, one of Denver's oldest black congregations, bringing back the original 1920s stained glass that had been painted over during the 1960s. I was the lead architect on the 5 Points Heritage Center, a project that Architectural Digest featured in their September 2015 issue. My most recent project, completed just 3 months before I bought my cabin, was the Rossonian Hotel restoration, a $12 million undertaking that brought back the historic jazz venue where Duke Ellington, Count Basie, and Ella Fitzgerald once performed. The governor of Colorado presented me with the state's Historic Preservation Award at a ceremony on June 18, 2024, with 200 people in attendance. But I never talked about these things at family gatherings. I drove a 12-year-old Toyota Camry. I lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in the same 5 Points neighborhood where I grew up. When people asked what I did, I said, "I'm an architect. I restore old buildings." And I left it at that. My husband, Samuel Coleman, died on November 3, 2014, 10 years, 3 months, and 7 days before this story begins. Massive heart attack at age 58. We'd been married 31 years. We'd promised each other that when we retired, we'd buy a cabin in the mountains where we could watch the seasons change and finally rest. After Samuel died, I worked harder, stayed later at the office, took on bigger projects. Because going home to our empty house in 5 Points was too quiet, too painful, too full of the life we were supposed to have together. For 10 years I saved every extra dollar, lived on half my salary, put the rest away. By September 2024, I had $485,000 in my retirement account, enough to buy the cabin Samuel and I had dreamed about. I found it on September 5, 2024, 847 Wilderness Road, Breckenridge, Colorado, 80424. A timber frame cabin built in 1997, sitting on 3 acres with a view of the Rocky Mountains that made me cry the first time I saw it. The previous owners, a couple named Henderson, were asking $475,000. I offered $485,000, $10,000 over asking, because I didn't want to lose it. They accepted the same day. I closed on September 8, 2024. Moved in on September 9. Spent that first evening unpacking boxes until midnight, then stood on my deck watching dawn break over the mountains, painting the peaks in shades of pink and gold that photographers pay thousands to capture. For the first time since Samuel died, I felt at peace. That peace lasted exactly 43 hours. September 10, 2024, 6:30 a.m. The phone rang while I was making coffee, dark roast from a local shop called Mountain Brew that I'd discovered the day before. Through my window, early morning light was just touching the aspens, turning their leaves to liquid gold. I answered without checking the caller ID. Big mistake. Mom, my son's voice cracked through the speaker. Not Deshaun, not my 40-year-old son who worked as a sales manager at Premier Auto Group on South Broadway in Denver, pulling down $78,000 a year, plus commission. This voice belonged to someone desperate. Drowning. Mom, I need your help. Right now. I was instantly awake. Deshaun, what's wrong? Is Zara okay? Zara, my granddaughter. 11 years old, brilliant, beautiful, with her grandfather's eyes and her grandmother's determination. The thought of anything happening to that child made my chest physically hurt. Zara's fine. Mom, it's the house. The bank is foreclosing. We're going to lose everything. I set down my coffee mug. Carefully. The way you handle something fragile when your hands want to shake. Foreclosing? Deshaun, how did you get behind on your mortgage? It doesn't matter how it happened. His voice rose, frantic. What matters is we've got 10 days. 10 days, Mom, or we're on the street. The bank won't negotiate unless we show we have assets. I need your cabin as collateral. Just temporarily. I swear it's temporary. Deshaun, I just bought this place 2 days ago. I know. And it's worth way more than you paid for it, right? That's what we need. Something valuable to show the bank we're serious about catching up on payments. Mom, please. This is for Zara. Your granddaughter is going to lose her home. The Zara card. He played it like he was dealing blackjack in Vegas. How much are you behind? I asked. A pause. Too long. $47,000. $47,000. The number sat between us like a third person on the call. Deshaun, how do you get $47,000 behind on a mortgage without asking for help sooner? There wasn't time. They spiraled. But I can fix this. I just need you to sign some papers. I'm coming up there on September 17th with a realtor who can handle the paperwork. Guy named Kyle Anderson. He specializes in this kind of thing. What kind of thing? Collateral agreements. It's standard. You sign over temporary rights to the property, we show the bank we have assets, they give us time to catch up on payments, then we release the collateral, and everything goes back to normal. Everything goes back to normal. The phrase echoed in my head. Because nothing about this felt normal. Deshaun, I need to think about this. There's no time to think. He was almost yelling now. Mom, I'm begging you. Don't you understand? Zara is going to be homeless. Is that what you want? Your granddaughter living in some motel because you couldn't help us when we needed it? I closed my eyes. Saw Zara's face. Heard her laugh. Remembered the last time she'd visited. How she'd asked about marine biology even though she lived in landlocked Colorado. How she'd told me she wanted to save the dolphins. We'll talk when you get here, I said quietly. On the 17th. So you'll do it? You'll sign? We'll talk. Mom, thank you. Thank you so much. You're saving our lives. He hung up before I could say anything else. I stood in my kitchen, my beautiful new kitchen in my beautiful new cabin that I'd saved 42 years to afford, and felt something cold settle in my stomach. Because here's what I knew about my son. Deshaun Coleman was born on July 22, 1984. I'd raised him alone after Samuel died, working 60-hour weeks to make sure he had everything he needed. I'd paid $135,000 for his education at Colorado State University, a 4-year degree that turned into 5.5 years because he changed his major 3 times. I'd paid $42,000 for his wedding to Brittany Davis on June 12, 2019, at the Ritz-Carlton in Denver. Ice sculptures, premium open bar, destination bachelor party in Las Vegas. Brittany had insisted on perfection, and I'd written the check without complaint because I wanted my son to be happy. I'd loaned him $30,000 for the down payment on their house in 2017, a loan he'd promised to repay within 2 years. 7 years later, I was still waiting. That's $207,000 I'd given my son over the course of his life. Not counting birthday gifts, Christmas presents, helping with groceries when times were tight, paying for Zara's summer camp last year. And now he was calling me, desperate, asking for my retirement cabin as collateral, because he was $47,000 behind on his mortgage. Something wasn't right. But he'd used Zara, my grandbaby. And he absolutely knew, that I would do anything to protect that child. I poured my coffee down the sink. Suddenly it tasted bitter. 2 hours later, my phone rang again. This time caller ID showed, Brittany Coleman. My daughter-in-law had never called me directly. Not once in the 5 years she'd been married to my son. We'd spoken maybe 3 times at family gatherings, and even then she was always looking at her phone, always somewhere else to be. I answered. "Hello, Brittany." "Mom, Jasmine." Her voice was honey, pure honey dripping through the phone. "I wanted to call and thank you personally for what you're doing for us." Mom, Jasmine. She'd never called me that before. It was always Deshawn's mom, or just a vague nod in my direction. "I haven't agreed to anything yet," I said carefully. "Oh, I know. But Deshawn told me about the conversation and her voice caught, perfectly timed. "I'm so grateful. You have no idea how scared we've been. Zara doesn't know yet. We're trying to protect her from all this stress. But knowing that you're there for us, that you're willing to help, it means everything." There was something about her tone, something rehearsed, like she'd practiced this speech before making the call. "Brittany, how did you get so far behind on the mortgage?" "Oh, you know how it is." Light, breezy, dismissive. "Expenses add up. Deshawn's been working so hard trying to provide for us. Sometimes things just spiral before you realize it. But we're going to fix it. With your help, we can get back on track." She hadn't answered my question. She'd just filled the air with words that meant nothing. "And Kyle Anderson?" I asked. "The realtor Deshawn mentioned?" "Oh, Kyle's wonderful. He's helped several families in our neighborhood with similar situations. He knows exactly how to structure these collateral agreements so they're simple and painless. You won't even notice, really. It's just paperwork. Just paperwork." "I'll see you on the 17th, I said. "See you then, Mom, Jasmine. And thank you again. You're so generous." She hung up. I sat on my deck, looking at the mountains, and replayed both conversations in my head. Deshawn, frantic, desperate, emotional. Brittany, smooth, prepared, grateful. Too smooth, too prepared. And something else bothered me. Brittany had mentioned Kyle Anderson like she knew him well. He's helped several families in our neighborhood. But if they were about to lose their house, why would they care about helping other families? Why would that detail even come up? Unless Kyle Anderson was helping them with something else entirely. I pulled out my phone and Googled. Kyle Anderson, Denver Realtor. 3 different realtors came up. I clicked through to their websites, looking at photos, trying to figure out which one was coming to my cabin in 7 days. The third one made my stomach drop. Kyle Anderson, Summit Realty Group, specializing in fast property sales and urgent transactions. His photo showed a man in his early 40s, expensive suit, practiced smile. Not a mortgage specialist. A sales agent. I sat very still. Then I did what I'd done for 42 years when I encountered something that didn't make sense in a building plan. I investigated. September 14th, 2024. 4 days after Deshawn's call. 3 days before their scheduled visit. I needed groceries. The cabin's pantry was still mostly empty, and I'd been living on coffee and the sandwiches I'd bought from a deli in town. Time to stock up properly. I drove down the mountain into Breckenridge, windows open, pine-scented air rushing through my truck. For the first time since Deshawn's call, I felt almost normal. I'd spent the past few days researching Colorado property law, reading about life estates and homestead exemptions, trying to understand what collateral agreement actually meant. I'd learned enough to know that something was very wrong with Deshawn's story, but I hadn't figured out exactly what yet. I spotted Mountain Brew Coffee on Main Street and decided caffeine came before groceries. The cafe occupied a restored Victorian house. Original crown molding, refinished hardwood floors, exposed brick walls. The architect in me appreciated the work someone had done to preserve the historic details while modernizing the functionality. I ordered a large dark roast from a young barista with purple hair and multiple piercings. While waiting, I scanned for a seat. Most tables were occupied, but a corner booth sat empty, partially hidden by a decorative barnwood partition. Perfect. I settled in with my coffee and phone, checking email. Behind me, on the other side of the partition, 2 women were talking. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. The partition just didn't do much for sound. At first I wasn't paying attention, just background noise while I scrolled through work emails from former colleagues. Then I heard my name. Jasmine spent literally everything on that cabin. I froze, phone still in my hand, coffee halfway to my lips. The voice continued. Familiar, too familiar. Deshawn says it's worth like $520,000, maybe more. Once the old lady signs the papers, we wait a month, then sell, pay off Deshawn's mess, and still have plenty left over. Brittany. That was Brittany's voice. My heart started pounding. Slow, heavy beats that I could feel in my throat. Wait, I thought this was about foreclosure? Another woman, younger, uncertain. Brittany laughed. Actually laughed. Girl, no. That's just the story we told Jasmine. Needed something dramatic, you know, make her feel guilty. The grandson angle really sealed it. I accidentally knocked my coffee mug. It clattered against the saucer, loud in the quiet cafe. I bent down to steady it, and from that lower angle, I could see through a gap in the partition. Brittany, sitting with a woman I didn't recognize, African American, maybe late 20s, expensive workout clothes. Brittany was wearing designer sunglasses pushed up on her head, holding an iced latte, looking completely relaxed. But what about Zara? The other woman asked. You said she might lose her home. Shanice, please. Brittany waved her hand dismissively. Zara doesn't know anything. Kids shouldn't worry about adult problems. We're not losing the house. We're just drowning in Deshawn's poker debts. $90,000 because my husband can't stay away from online casinos. $90,000, not $47,000 in mortgage arrears. $90,000 in gambling debts. I sat perfectly still, barely breathing. That's really manipulative, Shanice said quietly. It's survival, Brittany shot back. Jasmine's been sitting on retirement money for years while we're struggling. She owes Deshawn anyway, after making him grow up with barely anything. This cabin, it should have been ours from the start. She had her whole life to make money. We're in our prime. We deserve this. The cabin should have been ours from the start. But won't she figure it out? Shanice pressed. How? We already have a buyer lined up. Some tech guy from California who wants a mountain retreat. Kyle's handling everything. He's Deshawn's college buddy, owes him a favor. Soon as Jasmine signs the deed over, we're done. Old lady will be back in some apartment in Denver before she realizes what happened. Old lady. I stood up. Slowly. Carefully. Left a $20 bill on the table. Way too much for one coffee. But I wasn't thinking about change. I walked out. Brittany and Shanice never even looked up. In my truck, I gripped the steering wheel with both hands. 42 years of architecture had taught me one fundamental skill. When you find structural damage, don't react emotionally. You document. You analyze. You plan your response. So I sat in that parking lot in downtown Breckenridge, Colorado, and I replayed everything I'd just heard. My son, the boy I'd raised alone after his father died, the child I'd worked double shifts to put through college, the man I'd given $207,000 to over the course of his life, had looked me in the eye and lied. Not a small lie, not a desperate exaggeration, a calculated, premeditated scheme to steal everything I owned. And Brittany, sweet, grateful, honey-voiced Brittany, who'd called me Mom Jasmine for the first time in 5 years, who'd thanked me for my generosity, who'd talked about protecting Zara from stress. She'd sat in a coffee shop and laughed about stealing from me, called me old lady, said I owed Deshawn, that the cabin should have been ours from the start. Pure entitlement. Crystallized entitlement. I started the engine but didn't drive yet. Deshawn had said $47,000 in mortgage arrears. Brittany had said $90,000 in poker debts. The numbers didn't match because none of it was real. They weren't losing their house. They weren't in foreclosure. They were in debt from Deshawn's gambling addiction, and they'd decided the easiest solution was to steal my retirement cabin. Kyle's handling everything. He's Deshawn's college buddy. Kyle Anderson wasn't a neutral realtor helping with a collateral agreement. He was Deshawn's friend, facilitating theft. We already have a buyer lined up. They'd planned this before Deshawn even called me. Found a buyer. Arranged the sale. Calculated how much profit they'd make after paying off the gambling debts. All they needed was my signature on the paperwork. And they'd used Zara, my innocent, brilliant, beautiful granddaughter, as bait, knowing I would do anything to protect that child. I drove back to my cabin, slowly, obeying every speed limit. My hands were steady on the wheel. Because here's what they didn't know. I wasn't just an architect who fixed old buildings. I was Jasmine Coleman, FAIA, Fellow of the American Institute of Architects, one of the first Black female architects licensed in Colorado, the woman who'd restored the Blair Caldwell Library, the shorter AME church, the Rossonian Hotel. I'd spent 42 years navigating Colorado's Byzantine zoning laws, historic preservation requirements, and property regulations. I'd worked with the state's top real estate attorneys, testified as an expert witness in landmark cases, and served on the Denver Planning Board. I knew every building inspector, every zoning attorney, every judge who specialized in property law in the Front Range. And I knew exactly how to protect what was mine. Deshaun thought I was an easy mark. Some old lady who'd just hand over her cabin because he'd asked nicely and used his daughter as leverage. He'd underestimated me. They both had. Big mistake. I pulled into my driveway, got out of the truck, and stood looking at my cabin. My beautiful cabin at 847 Wilderness Road, purchased with 42 years of hard work and careful saving. The dream Samuel and I had shared. They thought they could take this from me. I smiled. Not a happy smile. A cold, calculating smile. Let them come on September 17th with their fake paperwork and their college buddy Realtor. Let them walk into my home thinking they'd already won. I had 3 days to prepare. And I was very, very good at preparation. September 14th, 2024, 3:47 p.m. I sat at my dining table, the same table where Deshaun and Brittany would sit in 3 days, expecting me to sign away my future. And I opened a box I hadn't looked at in years. Inside, my career. My real career. The one my son had never bothered to ask about. The first item was a photograph from June 18, 2024. Governor Jared Polis shaking my hand at the state capitol, presenting me with the Colorado Historic Preservation Award. 200 people in attendance. The plaque read, Jasmine Marie Coleman, FAIA, for extraordinary contributions to the preservation of Colorado's African American heritage. Next, a letter dated March 3, 2015, on official letterhead from the National Register of Historic Places. We are pleased to inform you that the Blair Caldwell African American Research Library restoration, under your leadership, has been recognized for excellence in historic preservation. Then the Architectural Digest spread from September 2015. 6 full pages featuring the 5 Points Heritage Center. My photo on page 3 standing in front of the building I'd designed. The caption, Jasmine Coleman, one of Colorado's foremost preservation architects, brings new life to historic Black landmarks. Newspaper clippings from the Rossonian Hotel grand reopening. Denver Post, March 12, 2024. $12 million restoration brings Jazz Age glory back to 5 Points. Business cards from every major contractor in Colorado. Personal cell phone numbers for 3 Colorado Supreme Court justices. A handwritten note from the Denver mayor. Jasmine, lunch soon? Need your input on the 16th Street Mall renovation. Michael's certificates, awards, commendations, invitations to speak at conferences in Chicago, New York, Atlanta, Los Angeles. 42 years of expertise, of respect, of recognition. And my son had no idea any of it existed. Because I'd chosen to be humble, chosen to be quiet, chosen to drive a 12-year-old Camry and live in my modest house in 5 Points, and say I restore old buildings when people asked what I did. I'd made myself small because I didn't want Deshaun to feel intimidated. Didn't want him to feel less than. Wanted him to love me for who I was as a person, not what I'd achieved professionally. Instead, I'd made myself a target. Brittany's voice echoed in my head. She had her whole life to make money. We deserve this. They thought I was nothing. Nobody. Just an old lady with one lucky asset they could steal. Time to show them exactly who Jasmine Coleman really was. I pulled out my phone and called a number I hadn't used in 6 months. He answered on the second ring. Robert Hayes. Robert, it's Jasmine Coleman. I need legal help. Family matter. How fast can you move? A pause. Jasmine. Haven't heard from you since the Rossonian closing. What's going on? I told him everything. The phone call from Deshaun. The coffee shop conversation. The fake foreclosure. The $90,000 gambling debt. The buyer already lined up. Kyle Anderson, September 17th. Robert listened without interrupting. Good lawyer skill. And when I finished, he was quiet for several seconds. Jasmine, this is elder financial abuse. That's a felony in Colorado under Title 18 6.5103. We could pursue criminal charges. Have them both arrested. No. My voice came out flat. Certain. No police? No prosecutors. I want something more elegant. Elegant? I want to protect my property in a way they can't undo or contest, and I want them to understand exactly what they tried to do. They think I'm stupid, Robert. Time to educate them. A sound that might have been approval. Life estate deed would be perfect. You transfer ownership to yourself as life tenant. You retain right to occupy until death, and the property cannot be sold without your explicit written consent. I'd also recommend a conservation easement, limits development rights, makes it essentially worthless to buyers looking to flip, and a homestead declaration under Colorado Revised Statutes Title 3841, which protects against creditors up to $250,000. How long to prepare? If we move fast, I can have drafts by tomorrow afternoon. We'll need a notary, but I can handle that in-house. Then file with Summit County Clerk and Recorder's Office. 48 hours to process. Everything will be public record before your son arrives. Do it. Jasmine, one more thing. These documents, we can backdate the effective date to before your son's phone call. September 8th, right after you purchase the property. Completely legal as long as we're honest about when they're signed versus when they take effect. Establishes that your intent to protect the property was independent of their scheme. Brilliant. Ruthlessly brilliant. Make it happen, Robert, and I'll be at your office tomorrow morning with everything you need. After we hung up, I sat with the box of achievements in front of me, feeling something shift inside my chest. Not anger anymore. Purpose. September 15th, 2024. 9 a.m. Robert Hayes' office occupied the 8th floor of a glass tower on 17th Street in downtown Denver. Modern, sleek, expensive. His name on the door, Hayes and Morrison Law, with specializing in property and estate law underneath. I'd driven down from Breckenridge before sunrise, watching the mountains fade to foothills fade to city as Highway 70 carried me east. The same drive I'd made thousands of times over 42 years. But this time felt different. This time, I was going to war. Robert met me in the lobby himself. African-American, mid-50s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment back when I had a mortgage. We'd worked together on the Brown Palace Hotel restoration in 2012. I'd needed expert guidance on deed restrictions and historic preservation requirements. Sharp mind, sharper ethics. You look tired, he said as we rode the elevator up. Didn't sleep much. Understandable. Your son tried to rob you. The bluntness was oddly comforting. No euphemisms, no softening. Just the truth. His office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Denver. Cherry desk, leather chairs. Law degrees from Howard University and Georgetown. But what caught my attention was a small architectural model on his credenza. A miniature Brown Palace hotel. I keep it as a reminder, Robert said, following my gaze. Best project I ever consulted on. You taught me more about property law in 6 months than law school taught me in 3 years. He gestured to a chair. Now, tell me everything again. Leave nothing out. I need every detail. For the next 2 hours we worked. I provided documents, purchase agreement for the cabin, title insurance, property survey, tax assessment from Summit County showing the cabin's current value at $520,000, $35,000 more than I'd paid just 7 days ago. Robert drafted language while I reviewed, suggested changes, caught details. The life estate deed was 12 pages, dense legal terminology establishing that I, Jasmine Marie Coleman, born March 15, 1961, currently of sound mind and body, hereby transfer ownership of the property located at 847 Wilderness Road, Breckenridge, Colorado, 80424, to myself as life tenant, retaining exclusive right to occupy said property until death, with the explicit provision that said property cannot be sold, transferred, or encumbered without my written consent, notarized and witnessed by. The conservation easement was longer, 18 pages detailing exactly what restrictions applied. No expansion of the existing structure beyond current square footage. No subdivision of the 3-acre parcel. No commercial development. No clear-cutting of existing timber. No alterations to the view shed. The Colorado Headwaters Land Trust would hold the easement in perpetuity. The homestead declaration was simpler. 3 pages of statutory language declaring 847 Wilderness Road as my primary residence, thereby protected from creditors and judgments, up to $250,000 under Colorado law. Who holds the conservation easement? I asked. Colorado Headwaters Land Trust. I've worked with them before on similar properties in Summit County. They'll accept it as a charitable donation. You get a tax deduction, they get another protected property in their portfolio. Win-win. Robert looked up from his laptop. This also means any potential buyer would have to deal with the land trust. Good luck explaining to them why an elderly black woman who just placed her property in conservation is suddenly trying to sell it to pay her son's gambling debts. By 1 p.m., we had complete drafts. Robert called in his paralegal, a young woman named Michelle who brought a notary stamp and witness forms. We signed everything. Robert had prepared the documents with an effective date of September 8, 2024, the day I'd closed on the cabin, 2 days before Deshawn's phone call. Everything legal, everything documented, everything bulletproof. These go to Summit County Clerk and Recorder tomorrow morning, Robert said, handing me copies in a leather portfolio. 48 hours to process. By the time your son arrives on the 17th, they'll be part of the public record. Irrevocable. I held the portfolio. Felt its weight. My future, my protection, my fortress. One more thing, Robert said. Get the property appraised. Professional appraisal, not just the tax assessment. If it's worth significantly more than your purchase price, that strengthens our position. Shows this was a sophisticated investment, not just a desperate retiree's last asset. I called an appraiser I'd worked with on the Rossonian project. Keisha Henderson, one of the few African-American women in the field. She could visit the cabin tomorrow, have a report by the 16th. Perfect timing. Robert, I said as I stood to leave. Thank you. Jasmine, your son is attempting something that, if successful, would constitute a felony. He deserves to understand the consequences. He will, but on my terms. Robert smiled. That's what I like to hear. September 15th to 16th, 2024. The next 2 days moved in slow motion and high speed simultaneously. Slow motion because every hour felt like waiting for a storm. High speed because I had so much to prepare. September 15th afternoon. Keisha Henderson arrived at my cabin with her camera and measuring tape. Spent 3 hours documenting every detail. Original timber framing from 1997. Hand-carved corbels. Period-appropriate hardware. The restoration work I'd already begun on the interior trim. Craftsman details that most people wouldn't notice, but that added significant value. September 16th morning, Keisha's report arrived via email. Market value, $520,000. $35,000 more than I'd paid. The appraisal cited the quality of construction, the prime location, the recent market surge in Summit County, and, this part made me smile, evidence of professional architectural expertise in the preliminary interior restoration work. I printed it, added it to the folder. September 16th afternoon. Deshawn texted. Still good for 2 p.m. tomorrow? Kyle confirmed. Thanks again, Mom, you're saving our lives. I stared at that message for a full minute. Saving our lives. The lie was so complete, so perfect, that part of me wondered if Deshawn actually believed it. If he'd told the lie so many times, to Brittany, to Kyle, to himself, that it had become truth in his mind. Or maybe he was just that good at manipulation. I texted back. See you then. September 16th evening. I couldn't eat. Made dinner, grilled chicken and vegetables, but it sat on my plate, untouched, while I reviewed my folder one more time. Life estate deed. Filed September 15th, recorded September 16th. Summit County document number 2024-087654. Conservation easement. Filed September 15th, recorded September 16th. Held by Colorado Headwaters, Land Trust in perpetuity. Homestead declaration. Filed September 15th, recorded September 16th. Protected up to $250,000. Professional appraisal. Market value, $520,000. Everything in order. Everything documented. Everything legal. My phone rang. Patricia Williams, my neighbor. The retired real estate attorney. Jasmine, I saw the filings in the public record. Life estate deed, conservation easement, homestead declaration. A pause. You protecting yourself from something? I'd met Patricia exactly once over tea on her porch 3 days ago. But there's something about black women of a certain age. We recognize each other. We protect each other. My son is coming tomorrow, I said. He thinks he's going to convince me to sign over my cabin as collateral for a foreclosure that doesn't exist. What he's actually going to discover is that I've made the property legally untouchable. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then, good. That life estate deed is a work of art, by the way. Your attorney knows what they're doing. 42 years in architecture teaches you who's competent and who's just expensive. Jasmine, your son is going to be angry when he realizes. More than angry, he'll feel betrayed. Ironic, given what he was planning. True, but that won't matter to him. Are you ready for that? Was I? I thought about Deshawn at 8 years old, helping me sand baseboards on a restoration project, asking questions about load-bearing walls. At 15, sullen and distant after his father died. At 25, asking for money again. At 40, scheming to rob me. I'm ready, I said. After we hung up, I stood on my deck watching the sun set behind the mountains, turning the peaks to fire. Tomorrow, my son would arrive expecting to take everything. Instead, he'd learn exactly who his mother was. And it would change him. Forever. One way or another. September 17th, 2024, 1:47 p.m. I was ready at noon. The folder sat on my dining table, organized with the precision of 42 years creating architectural specifications. Every document flagged with sticky notes. Every page ready to be produced at exactly the right moment. I'd made coffee. Strong. Dark. Not because I wanted it, but because having something to do with my hands would keep them from shaking. Because despite everything, despite the anger, despite the betrayal, despite the cold calculation of the past 3 days, this was still my son. The boy I'd raised alone. The man who was about to learn a very hard lesson. At 1:47 p.m., I heard vehicles on the gravel driveway. 3 of them. I watched from my window. Deshawn's Audi came first. Black. Sleek. The same car I'd helped him buy 3 years ago with a $5,000 loan for the down payment. Another loan he'd never repaid. Brittany's Lexus followed. White, pristine, designer sunglasses visible even from here. Then a silver BMW, Kyle Anderson presumably. They parked in a row, like soldiers preparing for battle. Deshawn got out first. Polo shirt, khakis. Big smile on his face. The smile of someone who thought he'd already won. Brittany emerged from her Lexus, checking her phone immediately. Even now, even here. Kyle Anderson stepped out of the BMW carrying a leather briefcase. Early 40s, expensive suit. Practiced, professional smile. They climbed my deck stairs together. Deshawn saw me through the window, waved. Hey Mom, thanks for doing this. I opened the door. Deshawn, Brittany, you must be Kyle. Handshakes all around. Kyle's grip was firm, confident. Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Coleman. Deshawn's told me so much about you. I bet he had. Come in, I said. Calm, pleasant. Channeling 42 years of dealing with difficult contractors and demanding clients. Never show weakness. Never reveal your hand too early. They settled around my dining table. Kyle immediately opened his briefcase, pulling out documents. Professional efficiency. This should be very straightforward, Mrs. Coleman. We're establishing a collateral agreement with the property as security. Basic deed of trust, temporary arrangement. Once Deshawn catches up on his mortgage payments, we file a release and everything reverts to normal. Brittany leaned forward, all earnest concern. Mom, Jasmine, we really can't thank you enough. This gives us the breathing room we need. The bank has been so difficult to work with. Deshawn nodded vigorously. They wouldn't even talk to us until we could show we had assets. This saves us. This saves Zara. I let them talk. Watched Kyle spread papers across my table. Watched Brittany's foot tap nervously under the table. Not anxiety, anticipation. Watched Deshawn glance at his watch, eager to get this done. Kyle pushed documents toward me. So if you could just sign here, Mrs. Coleman, and here, initial here. We'll get these filed and you'll be helping save your son's family. His pen was already out. Expensive. Mont Blanc, probably. I didn't reach for it. Instead, I picked up my folder. Before we proceed, I said quietly, there's something you should see. The room's energy shifted, subtle, like air pressure dropping before a storm. I opened the folder, removed the first document. This, I said, sliding it across the table, is a life estate deed, Filed with Summit County on September 15, 2024. Document number 2024-087654. Kyle picked it up, started reading. His professional smile began to fade. It transfers ownership of this property to me as life tenant, which means I retain the right to live here until my death. More importantly, I paused, let that sink in. The property cannot be sold, transferred, or encumbered without my explicit written consent, notarized and witnessed. Deshawn's face had gone pale, not dramatically, just a gradual draining of color. There's more. I pulled out the second document. This is a conservation easement, also filed September 15th, held by the Colorado Headwaters Land Trust in perpetuity. It restricts all development rights on this property, no expansion, no subdivision, no commercial use. Essentially, I looked at Kyle directly. It makes this property worthless to anyone looking to flip it for quick profit. Brittany's foot stopped tapping. And this, third document, is a homestead declaration under Colorado Revised Statutes Title 3841. It protects this property from creditors and judgments up to $250,000, which means even if someone did somehow gain control, they couldn't use it to satisfy debts. Dead silence. Finally, I placed Keisha's appraisal on top of everything. A professional assessment completed yesterday, showing this property has a current market value of $520,000, which backs up my decision to legally protect it. Nobody spoke. Kyle's confident smile was completely gone. He was reading the life estate deed, flipping pages, looking for loopholes that didn't exist. Brittany's eyes were wide, calculating, trying to figure out what had gone wrong. Deshawn looked like someone had punched him in the stomach. I let the silence stretch. Then, very calmly, with these legal protections in place, there is no collateral arrangement because, I looked directly at my son. There is no mortgage foreclosure, is there, Deshawn? His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. Brittany tried to recover. Mom, Jasmine, I don't understand what you're implying. I cut her off. Mountain Brew Coffee, September 14th, 11:30 in the morning. You were sitting with your friend Shanice discussing how you plan to sell my cabin to pay Deshawn's $90,000 gambling debt. Brittany's face went from confusion to shock to pure panic in the space of 3 seconds. You said, and I'm quoting, "That's just the story we told Jasmine." The grandson angle really sealed it. You were spying on us? Brittany's voice rose, indignant. I was buying coffee. You were loud. I turned to Deshawn. $90,000 in online poker debts. That's interesting, because you told me $47,000 in mortgage arrears. The numbers don't match, Deshawn. Why is that? My son's face had gone from pale to bright red splotches on his cheeks. And Kyle. I looked at the realtor, who'd gone very still. How much commission were you expecting from this sale? 15,000, 20? Must be disappointing to realize the property you were planning to flip is legally untouchable. Kyle gathered his papers with jerky movements. There's been a misunderstanding. I was simply trying to help. You were facilitating elder financial abuse, I said. Flat. Matter of fact. That's a felony in Colorado under Title 18 6.5103. Carries 2 to 6 years in prison. I let that hang in the air for exactly 3 seconds. I'm not pressing charges, not against any of you, but I want to be very clear about what almost happened here. Deshawn found his voice. Desperate. Drowning. Mom, listen, please just listen. No. The word came out harder than I'd intended, but I didn't soften it. You listen. For 42 years I gave you everything. $135,000 for college. $42,000 for your wedding. $30,000 for your house down payment that you never repaid. I raised you alone after your father died. I worked double shifts so you could have opportunities I never had. My voice didn't shake, didn't waver. And you thanked me by lying to my face, by using Zara, my granddaughter, your daughter, as emotional blackmail, by planning to steal the one thing I'd saved for my retirement. Brittany grabbed her purse. This is insane. Deshawn, tell her. But Deshawn wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me. And for the first time in years, maybe decades, he was really seeing me. Not Mom, who would always help. Not the ATM who wrote checks without questions. Not the old lady who could be manipulated. Me, Jasmine Coleman, architect, strategist, Woman who'd built a legal fortress in 3 days. Fear. That's what I saw in his eyes. He'd finally understood. Here's what happens now, I said quietly. You leave. All 3 of you. You think very carefully about whether your relationship with me is worth repairing. Because what you did wasn't just illegal. It was cruel. Kyle was already moving toward the door. Brittany stood, heels clicking on my hardwood floor. I can't believe, this is Deshawn? Are you just going to let her go? Deshawn's voice was barely a whisper. Just go, Brittany. She stared at him for a moment, then stormed out. Kyle followed, practically running to his BMW. Deshawn lingered. His mouth worked like he was trying to find words. Any words. None came. He turned and walked out. I stood at my window and watched them leave. 3 vehicles pulling away in a cloud of dust and broken assumptions. Kyle's BMW peeled out first, gravel spraying. Brittany's Lexus followed, her silhouette rigid with fury. Deshawn's Audi went last. Slower. Like he was driving away from a funeral. The sound of their engines faded down Wilderness Road. Silence settled over my cabin like snow. I poured myself a bourbon. Maker's Mark. The good stuff I saved for special occasions. Sat on my deck with the folder of documents beside me. The mountains watched. Ancient, patient, indifferent to human drama. My phone rang. Patricia Williams. I saw them leave. Quick meeting. Very quick. How'd they take it? About as well as you'd expect. I sipped my bourbon. Shock. Denial. Defeat. Patricia was quiet for a moment. You did the right thing, Jasmine. Then why does it hurt so much? Because he's still your son. Love doesn't stop just because someone betrays you. It just gets more complicated. After we hung up, I sat alone with my bourbon and my legally protected cabin and the weight of what I'd just done. I'd won. Completely. Totally. Devastatingly. But victory felt cold. Because somewhere in Denver right now, my son was realizing that his mother wasn't who he thought she was. That the life he'd planned, selling my cabin, paying his debts, moving on like nothing happened, had collapsed. And his world was about to get much, much worse. But that wasn't my problem to fix. Not anymore. The sun sank lower. The mountains turned purple, then indigo, then black. I finished my bourbon, went inside, and for the first time in a week, I slept soundly. Justice, it turned out, made an excellent sleeping pill. September 20th, 2024, 3 days after the confrontation. Patricia Williams appeared at my door holding a casserole dish and wearing the expression of someone bringing bad news wrapped in hospitality. Jasmine, thought you might need some food and some information. We sat on my deck. She served me chicken and rice casserole that I didn't eat. Then she told me what she'd seen. I was at King Soopers yesterday morning. Saw your daughter-in-law in the parking lot of Premier Auto Group having what looked like a very public argument with your son. Lot of hand gestures. She drove off fast enough to leave rubber on the pavement. I set down my fork. How public? Half the dealership could hear her yelling something about gambling and lies. Your son's coworkers were watching through the showroom windows. Small towns. Word travels. And apparently, word traveled fast. Over the next week I learned, through Patricia, through her network of retired professionals, through the invisible web of information that exists in mountain communities, that my confrontation had been just the beginning. The dominoes were falling. September 22nd. Collection agencies started calling Deshawn and Brittany. Not just one or two. Multiple agencies representing multiple online gambling sites. Some domestic, some offshore. Calls to their home phone at 7 a.m. Calls to Brittany's cell during her marketing meetings. Calls to Deshawn's work number at Premier Auto Group. That last one was the problem. September 25th. Deshawn got his first official warning from his manager, Richard Connolly. Sales managers at premium auto dealerships weren't supposed to have debt collectors calling the showroom asking for payment on $20,000 gambling debts. Bad for the dealership's reputation. Bad for customer confidence. September 28th. Deshawn got his second warning, then a third. October 1st. Administrative review. Corporate speak for we're documenting reasons to fire you. I learned all this not from Deshawn. He hadn't called me once since leaving my cabin, but from the network. Patricia knew someone whose husband worked at Premier Auto Group. The husband told his wife. The wife told Patricia. Patricia told me. And then came the twist I hadn't expected. October 7th, 2024, 2:15 p.m. Robert Hayes called. Jasmine, your daughter-in-law just filed for divorce. Baker and Associates is representing her. They're not cheap. I sat down. Divorce. Filed this morning at Denver County Court. Case number 2024-DR-8847. She's citing irreconcilable differences, but, he paused. I called a friend at Baker and Associates. Off the record, the real issue is financial infidelity. Apparently Deshaun hid the extent of his gambling from Brittany until recently. Recently meaning when the cabin scheme failed. Precisely. Papers rustled on his end. Jasmine, they're sending over Brittany's sworn affidavit as part of the filing. I'm going to read you the relevant section. He cleared his throat. I, Brittany Marie Davis Coleman, being duly sworn, state the following. I believed my husband Deshaun Coleman when he told me his mother, Jasmine Coleman, had significant retirement assets and could easily afford to help us with our financial difficulties. Deshaun informed me we were $47,000 behind on our mortgage and facing foreclosure. I only learned on September 14, 2024, that the actual debt was $90,000 in gambling losses, not mortgage arrears. Deshaun had been hiding encrypted gambling applications on his phone and had forged bank statements to conceal the extent of his addiction. When I expressed doubts about the plan to use his mother's cabin as collateral, Deshaun assured me it was a legitimate, temporary arrangement that would harm no one. I now understand I was manipulated into participating in what amounts to attempted elder financial abuse. I deeply regret my actions and take full responsibility for my participation, but I was acting on false information provided by my husband. Silence. Jasmine, you there? I'm here. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. She didn't know. She knew something. The affidavit continues. I acknowledge that my statements to my friend Shanice Reynolds on September 14, 2024, were callous and inappropriate. I said things about Jasmine Coleman that I deeply regret. However, at that time, I genuinely believed the foreclosure story Deshaun had told me and thought we were simply securing a legitimate collateral agreement. I stood up, walked to my window. The aspens were turning gold now, late September bleeding into October. Robert, she called me old lady in that coffee shop. Said the cabin should have been theirs from the start, that I owed Deshaun. I know, the affidavit addresses that too. My family struggled financially when I was young. My father worked 3 jobs to put me through college. When I met Deshaun, he presented his mother as someone who had always had resources but chose not to share them. He told me Jasmine owned multiple properties in Denver and had plenty to spare. I now know this was false. I allowed my own financial anxieties and Deshaun's lies to cloud my judgment. There is no excuse for my behavior. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass. Brittany had been cruel, entitled, complicit. But she'd also been lied to. Not completely innocent. She'd made choices, said things, participated willingly. But the scheme, the real scheme, with the buyer already lined up, with Kyle Anderson facilitating, with the $90,000 in gambling debts, that had been Deshaun's construction. The affidavit requests sole custody of Zara, Robert continued, citing Deshaun's gambling addiction and recent termination of employment as evidence of instability. He was fired? Yesterday, October 6th. According to Brittany's filing, Deshaun missed 3 consecutive days of work without calling in, then showed up and had a screaming match with his manager about persecution. Security escorted him out. Management is considering a restraining order. My son, 40 years old, 40E, escorted out by security. Robert, send me the full affidavit. I need to read it myself. Already done. Check your email. After we hung up, I sat at my computer and read Brittany's statement. All 14 pages. And what I saw was more complicated than I wanted it to be. Yes, she'd been cruel. Yes, she'd participated. Yes, she'd laughed about stealing from me. But she'd also been drowning. Her affidavit detailed their financial situation. Deshaun had maxed out credit cards she didn't know existed. Taken out personal loans using their house as collateral. Gambled away his entire annual bonus, $32,000, in 6 weeks. She'd married a charming man with a good job and discovered too late that he was an addict who'd been lying to her for years. Just like he'd lied to me. Manipulation ran in patterns, and Deshaun had learned to manipulate everyone. Where had I gone wrong? October 12th, 2024, 7:43 p.m. My phone rang. Deshaun. I stared at his name on the screen for 4 rings before I answered. Mom. His voice was hollow, defeated. Nothing like the confident man who'd walked into my cabin 4 weeks ago. Deshaun. He stopped, started again. Brittany filed for divorce. Work fired me. The creditors are calling every day. I'm living in a studio apartment near the airport because I can't afford anything else. Everything's falling apart. I waited. I know I don't have any right to ask. I know what I did was, his voice cracked. But Mom, I need help. Please. I'm drowning here. 10 years ago I would have said yes immediately. Would have written a check, would have fixed it. But 10 years ago Samuel was still alive. 10 years ago I hadn't spent 4 decades learning that sometimes love means letting people face consequences. Deshaun, what do you want from me? I don't know. Money? Advice? Forgiveness? Anything? Mom, I lost everything. You didn't lose everything, I said quietly. You gambled it away. There's a difference. I know, okay? I have a problem. I'm sick. I need help. Then get help. Gamblers Anonymous meets Tuesday and Thursday nights at the community church on Colfax Avenue. 7 p.m. Free, anonymous, effective. That's it? That's all you're going to say? What do you want me to say, Deshaun? That I'll bail you out again? Give you money you'll gamble away? Let you use me as your safety net while you refuse to change? I'm your son. And I'm your mother. Which means the best help I can give you right now is letting you solve your own problems. Silence on the line. Then, very quietly, you've become cold. No, I've become wise. There's a difference. I hung up. And then I cried. Not for him, for the little boy he used to be. The child who'd sat on Samuel's shoulders at the park. Who'd asked questions about architecture and wanted to understand how buildings stood up. Who'd drawn pictures of houses and dreamed of becoming an architect like his mom. When had that boy become this man? And how much of it was my fault for always rescuing him? October 15th, 2024. 6:20 p.m. Grandma Jasmine? The small voice on the phone made my throat tight. Hi, baby girl. Mom says I can't stay with Dad alone anymore. She says he's not safe. But he's still my dad, right? 11 years old. Too young to understand addiction. Too young to process divorce. Too young to carry the weight of adult failures. Your dad loves you very much, Zara. He's just going through some hard times right now. The court wants to make sure you're safe while he figures things out. Did you and Dad have a fight? How do you explain betrayal to a child? We had a disagreement, adult stuff. But it doesn't change how much I love you. Or how much he loves you. Can I come visit your cabin? Mom showed me pictures. It looks really cool. Next weekend. I'll pick you up Saturday morning. We'll go hiking, see some elk, maybe spot some marmots. Really? Her voice brightened. Can we look for wildlife? I've been reading about Rocky Mountain ecosystems for my science project. We'll look for all the wildlife you want. After we hung up, I sat with the weight of it. Zara was the innocent casualty. She'd done nothing wrong. But she was paying the price anyway. Children always did when parents self-destructed. I called Brittany. First time since the confrontation. She answered on the 4th ring. Wary. Jasmine. I read your affidavit. All 14 pages. I'm sorry. For everything. I made terrible choices. Said terrible things. I have no excuse. You were lied to. That doesn't make what I said okay. No, but it adds context. I paused. Brittany, I'm picking up Zara this Saturday. I want her to know her grandmother loves her, no matter what's happening with the adults. A sound that might have been a sob. Thank you. She needs stability right now. Needs to know someone in this family is sane. How are you doing? She stopped, started again. I'm angry. At Deshaun for lying, at myself for believing him, at the whole situation. My lawyer says the divorce will take 6 months. Deshaun gets supervised visitation. 2 hours every other weekend with a court monitor present. He lost his job, so there's no child support. I'm back to living on my salary alone. The marketing job? Yeah, $48,000 a year. Not enough for our lifestyle, but enough to keep Zara in her school and me in therapy. Therapy's good. Therapy's expensive, but necessary. A pause. Jasmine, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that I see what I did. Really see it. And I'm sorry. We hung up shortly after. And I realized something. Brittany was trying. Actually trying. Unlike Deshawn, who'd called asking for money and hung up when I said no. 3 months later, January 12, 2025. Winter had settled over the mountains like a blanket. Snow 6 feet deep in places. The cabin warm and quiet, wood stove crackling, coffee steaming on my deck even though the temperature was 18 degrees. I'd seen Zara 6 times since October. Hiking trips, movie nights, long conversations about marine biology and climate change, and whether dolphins really were as smart as people said. Each visit she seemed more settled, more herself. And each visit she asked about her dad less and less. I'd gotten updates through the network. November 3rd, Deshawn found part-time work at the rental car desk at Denver International Airport. $15 an hour. Massive pay cut from his $78,000 sales manager salary, but it was work. November 10th, he'd attended his first Gamblers Anonymous meeting. Patricia's network confirmed it. Her friend's son was in the program, saw Deshawn there. November 24th, first payment arrived. A check for $500. Memo line. Payment 1 of 60. Loan repayment for $30,000. I'd stared at that check for a full minute before depositing it into the separate account Robert had set up. Legally binding. Formally documented. Deshawn was actually trying. December 1st. He attended his 8th consecutive GA meeting. December 15th. Payment 2 arrived. Another $500. December 22nd. He'd found full-time work. Morrison Construction, a mid-size commercial firm. Entry-level estimator position. $44,000 a year. Learning to read blueprints, calculate material costs, estimate labor hours. January 5th. Payment 3 arrived. And then on January 12th, I heard tires on my gravel driveway. I looked out the window. Deshawn's Audi. Dustier than I remembered. Dented passenger door that hadn't been there before. He stepped out slowly. Thinner. Much thinner. The polo shirt that used to fit perfectly now hung loose on his frame. I met him on the deck. Didn't invite him inside. Not yet. Mom. His voice cracked on the word. Can we talk? Please. 5 minutes. I nodded toward the chairs. We sat. Silence stretched between us like a canyon. Finally he spoke. I lost everything. My job. My wife. Probably the divorce isn't final yet, but she's not taking me back. My house, my reputation. I'm 40 years old, living in a 400-square-foot studio, working an entry-level construction job, paying off $90,000 in debts that will take me years to clear. He looked at his hands. Rough now. Construction work did that. But I deserved it. All of it. I tried to rob you, Mom. My own mother. Used Zara as bait. Brought a realtor to your house to help me commit theft. His voice shook. And when you defended yourself, brilliantly, completely, I blamed you. Said you were cold. Said you'd ruined my life. I waited. But you didn't ruin my life. You saved it. You forced me to see what I'd become. What we'd become, Brittany and me. And it was ugly. He pulled an envelope from his jacket, set it on the table between us. Payment for $500. On time. I'll keep making them until the $30,000 is paid back. With interest. All of it. I looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. Deshawn, why are you here? Because I need to say something I should have said 4 months ago. He met my eyes. I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. Not just for the cabin. For never seeing you. For taking you for granted. For treating you like an ATM instead of a person. For 40 years of entitlement. Tears now, running down his face. A 40-year-old man crying like a child. I didn't know who you really were. What you'd accomplished. How hard you'd worked. How much you'd sacrificed. I stood, went inside, returned with the box I'd shown Robert Hayes 4 months ago, set it on the table. Open it, he did, and for the next 20 minutes, I showed my son who his mother really was. The photograph with Governor Polis. The National Register of Historic Places certificate. The Architectural Digest spread. The letter from the mayor. The awards. The commendations, the recognition. 42 years of expertise he'd never asked about. Deshaun studied each item like he was seeing me for the first time. Which in a way he was. The Blair Caldwell Library, he whispered, holding the photo. I went there for a school project in 10th grade. You did this? Led the restoration team. $8 million project. 4 years of work. The Rossonian Hotel. I saw the grand opening on the news. They interviewed someone named Jasmine Coleman, but I didn't connect. You never asked. He set down the photo. Why didn't you tell me? I did. Multiple times. You never asked follow-up questions. I sat back down. I downplayed my achievements because I wanted you to respect me as a person, not be intimidated by my success. I drove an old Camry, lived in a modest house, said I restore old buildings when people asked what I did. You made yourself small. I made myself a target. I met his eyes. But that was my mistake, not yours. Your mistake was thinking that gave you the right to take what was mine. I know. Barely a whisper. Silence. Then I asked the question I'd been holding for 4 months. Deshaun, are you actually changing? Or are you just performing until I give you money? I'm changing. I swear to God I'm changing. He pulled out his phone, showed me proof. Gamblers Anonymous attendance record. 16 consecutive meetings, Tuesday and Thursday nights, documented and signed. Employment contract with Morrison Construction, dated December 22, 2024. Bank statements showing $500 payments to my account on November 24th, December 24th, January 7th, and today. Therapy intake forms from Dr. Sarah Mitchell, licensed addiction counselor. Sessions every Monday at 6 p.m. It's hard, he said. Every day is hard. I wake up and want to gamble. Want to find an easy way out. But I go to my meetings instead. I read my recovery materials. I call my sponsor. I'm doing the work, Mom. Really doing it. I studied him. Looked for lies, for manipulation. For the charming, confident man who'd walked into my cabin on September 17th, expecting to steal my future. What I saw instead was someone broken and rebuilding. Slowly, painfully, honestly. What do you want from me, Deshaun? Nothing. I don't deserve anything. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I did. Who you are. What I threw away. He stood. I should go. Sit down. He sat. I said I wouldn't give you money. I meant it. But I can give you something else. What? A path forward. On my terms. His eyes widened slightly. Hope, maybe. Or fear that I'd take it away. You keep attending GA. Keep seeing Dr. Mitchell. Keep making your $500 payments. They're legally binding now, you understand that? Robert Hayes drew up a formal loan agreement. $30,000 at 5% annual interest. 60 monthly payments. Miss one and I can pursue legal action. I understand. You rebuild your relationship with Zara. Not because the court requires supervised visits, but because she deserves better than what you've shown her. You show up. You stay sober from gambling. You become a father she can respect. I will. And you acknowledge what you tried to do. Publicly. To the family. No excuses. No justifications. Just the truth. He swallowed hard. When? I'll arrange a family meeting. 2 weeks. You'll tell everyone exactly what happened. Own it completely. And then... I paused. Then we start over. New relationship based on honesty and respect, not money or obligation. You willing to do that? Yes. No hesitation. I'll do all of it. We shook hands. Awkward. Tentative. But real. The first honest moment we'd had in years. 6 months later, July 4th, 2025. My deck was crowded. Deshaun stood at the grill, flipping burgers. 28 weeks sober from gambling. Still working at Morrison Construction. Recently promoted to junior estimator with a raise to $52,000 a year. Still making his $500 payments like clockwork. Brittany sat at the table, talking with Patricia Williams about marketing strategies for Patricia's consulting business. The divorce had been finalized in April, but they were trying, talking, co-parenting. Brittany had even thanked me, genuinely thanked me, for doing what needed to be done. Zara ran through the Aspens with Patricia's grandchildren, laughing, looking for wildlife, being 11 years old without the weight of adult disasters on her shoulders. And I sat in my chair, watching the mountains turn gold in the late afternoon light, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the peace I'd felt on September 9, 2024 when I first moved in. That had been the peace of arrival, of finally achieving a dream. This was different. Harder won, more real. The peace of boundaries enforced, of lessons taught, of family rebuilt on honest foundations instead of lies and manipulation. Deshawn brought me a burger. Extra pickles, no onions, the way you like it. Thank you. He hesitated. Mom, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. Thank you for not giving up on me. For caring enough to let me fall. For showing me who you really are. You're welcome. Now don't make me regret it. He smiled. Small, genuine. Wouldn't dream of it. That evening, after everyone left, I sat alone on my deck. My cabin at 847 Wilderness Road, Breckenridge, Colorado. Legally protected, completely secure, absolutely mine. Worth $545,000 now, according to the latest market assessment. The Summit County real estate boom showed no signs of slowing. I'd earned it twice, once through 42 years of work, once through 4 months of standing firm. Deshawn had lost his career, his marriage, his reputation. He'd been humbled completely. But he'd been given something more valuable, a chance to rebuild as someone better, someone honest, someone his daughter could respect. Brittany had lost her perfect life, her financial security, her comfortable illusions. But she'd gained clarity, therapy, a future built on her own terms. Zara had lost the illusion of a stable family, but she'd gained grandparents. Me and Patricia had become close, and the knowledge that adults could fail and still choose to be better. And I had learned something too. At 63 years old, I'd spent my whole life making myself smaller so others would feel bigger. Downplaying my achievements, hiding my success, being the humble, helpful mother who wrote checks and asked no questions. It had made me easy to underestimate, easy to manipulate, easy to target. Never again. I pulled out my phone and wrote a text to Robert Hayes. Thank you for the legal fortress. Best $3,000 I ever spent. He responded immediately. Best client I ever had. You taught me that protecting people sometimes means protecting them from their own family. I set down the phone and looked at the mountains. Samuel had been dead for 10 years, 3 months, and 28 days. We'd promised to retire here together, to watch the seasons change, to finally rest. He'd missed all of it, but somehow, I thought he'd be proud of what I'd done. Standing up, fighting back. Teaching our son the hardest lesson a parent can teach. Consequences. The stars came out. Sharp and cold and infinite. And I thought about all the women watching this story somewhere far away. Women in their 60s, 70s, who'd spent their lives being kind and generous and humble, only to be taken advantage of by the people they loved most. If you're one of those women, let me tell you what I learned. Being kind doesn't mean being weak. Being generous doesn't mean being foolish. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. Protect what's yours. Know your worth. Don't let anyone, not even your own children, convince you that you owe them your future. I learned that at 63, after 42 years of working and 10 years of grieving and 4 months of fighting for what was mine. The mountains had witnessed it all. They'd be here long after we were gone, watching other families struggle and heal, watching other people learn that respect isn't given. It's earned, protected, and sometimes fought for with everything you have. I stood up, went inside my legally protected cabin, and locked the door. Tomorrow, Zara was coming for the whole week. We'd hike, we'd explore, we'd talk about dolphins and marine biology and her dreams of saving the ocean. And I'd tell her stories about her grandfather Samuel. About resilience, about knowing your worth, about building a life that can't be stolen because it's built on foundations of self-respect. The greatest victory wasn't getting revenge on my son, it was learning, finally learning, that I deserved to be seen. And the moment I demanded to be seen, everything changed. Sleep came easily that night. Because justice, I'd discovered, made an excellent foundation. And from strong foundations you could build anything. Even a second chance. Even redemption. Even peace.